hello everyone. It's 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. actually on Saturday morning, and it's time to wake up and smell the rosin with the Seitz String Pros. And just as last week, I am all by myself today. It's 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. Okay. I'm all by myself today because Esther, my daughter, and a wonderful, amazing cellist, is still, out of town and out of state, having fun on her little vacation, which she definitely deserves greatly. And so today I'm left again all to myself. But I'm really, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for such a wonderful live last week. We had a lot of views and we had a lot of people that showed up and asked us wonderful comments, wonderful questions, actually asked us wonderful questions and posted wonderful comments. It was very helpful, and it made it very fun for me to conduct the masterclass. Oh, hello, Nicholas. Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today we are going over one of the less famous Kreutzer etudes. I would say Kreutzer number 5, and I think this etude is very often overlooked because it looks deceitfully simple. I'm going to pull up my stand here. It's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's literally 7 lines in my music. It's all like the same, just triple eighth notes, allegro moderato. It's not, doesn't look like it's super challenging, super show offish, so to say. So I myself also it kind of flies under the radar. However, this past week I was practicing it a lot, and I released the video of it, and I found so many amazing things in it that are very useful that I knew about, of course, but since I went really in depth with that etude, there were so many wonderful things. And in fact, what is interesting to me is that I had some wonderful comments on my previous video, and one of them by Mehdi KH. Thank you so much if you're watching. Thank you for your comments and for liking my video of Kreutzer number 3. But Mehdi KH asked me, she says, thanks so much, you're very welcome. I have problems with strings crossings. How can I make it better? Of course, in a fast tempo. I will appreciate if you make a video about it. And I actually, it's weird because I just posted Kreutzer number 5, and then I saw that comment and I replied and I said, by the way, I just posted Kreutzer number 5, and that is one of the best etudes to, if you are working on perfecting your string crossings, whether it's slow tempo or fast tempo, it's phenomenal for that. I also had a very fun request that has nothing to do with today's live, but I wanted to throw it out there that I will definitely be working on it, and that's from Eamon Becker 6 days ago, or maybe it's a little longer now. Thank you very much, but can you make us a video for the practice of Bach Prelude from Partita number 3? And I love that idea, so I wanted to just throw it out there, guys. My week-to-week challenge to myself, and I don't want to say challenge, my goal is to try to post a Kreutzer every week as much as I can and just progress through the whole book. And I was thinking of tying my master classes to whatever weekly Kreutzer I have, and of course when Esther comes back, she we will also tie it to whatever we're posting, maybe studies we're posting during that week on cello. But I definitely would like also to branch out into things like that Bach. But for that, if you would like certain pieces to be, done by us as tutorials or videos, please let us know, because it's easier for us. When it comes to etude books, it's easy because you just grab a book and you go, right? But when it comes to repertoire, to actual pieces, solo repertoire, there's so much that it's hard to figure out where to start. So this is wonderful. Again, Eamon, so let me just make sure I'm reading the name correctly. It's Eamon Becker or Becher. I hope I'm saying the name. But if you're watching, thank you again for your request, and I will definitely be doing that. Of course, it'll take me a little bit. I want to make sure and post the video, my video performance of that first, and then in that week, we will definitely have this live masterclass on the prelude. The Pelo Masita. Hello. I hope I didn't butcher your name, but thank you. Thank you for, she says, I love this, or he says, I love this. They say that they love this. Okay. So this is, like I said, live is, interesting situation. You can't really edit your weird mistakes. And so thank you so much again for your patience with me, but I really appreciate you guys, tuning in and watching this live. So today we are going, also if you read my comment at the beginning, not only we're going to go over the Kreutzer 5 in as much detail as we can, but also we're going to start off with E flat major scale. So for those of you who watched last week's masterclass, you were able to follow my B flat major scale with me, hopefully, and I shared with you a couple of ways to finger the B flat major scale. One is a little bit more traditional, or at least that's how I learned it when I was a kid for the first time, and another one is my favorite one. By the way, it's posted in the comments for the previous week's live. It's episode 6 of Wake Up and Smell the Rosin, that is titled Kreutzer 4 Masterclass. And so if you, after this, if you want to have a copy of that B flat major 3-octave scale with my fingerings that has both types of fingerings, the one on the top would be just a regular one, and the one on the bottom is my favorite type. And the reason I shared with you, the reason I love those fingerings is because those fingerings that are on the bottom of that B flat major scale, you can actually apply to any scale from B flat and up and play any 3-octave scale on the violin with those fingerings. And so today with E flat major, I will show you first what are more like the more common fingerings for E flat major, and then I'll show you how you can apply that B flat major fingering that I shared with you last week to E flat major scale, and it can work really well. So for those of you who've been here before, you know that we kind of like to do this as a practice altogether. So here's my A. Right? I always tune to, my A now is 440. Now, for those of you who might not know, I am Dr. Seitz. I teach violin at University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, but I'm originally from the former Soviet Union. And growing up, I was used to European A, which is much sharper. I mean, it usually is referred to as 442, but believe me, a lot of times it's way sharper than that. And so when I moved to the United States at first, and I do have perfect pitch, so for me it was very, at first it was difficult to get used to, and everything sounded so flat. But now that I'm used to 440, actually the European records sound super sharp to me. So anyway, so if you would like to practice along with me right now, or play along later, make sure tune to 440A, because otherwise it would be hard to follow. And as always, I will post a little tuning afterwards in the description box. So here is my A again. And so let me give you just a little explanation of my fingerings before we play together. So there are 2 ways to start E flat major scale. You can start in the 3rd position. And this way you're going to wait for your first shift until you get to the E string. So from G to E string, basically you will not have any shifts. You'll just start in the 3rd position. Now I have a couple of students who prefer to start in the 1st position, and that's fine too. In that case, you will shift to the 3rd position on D. That's like one of the most common shifts, I think, in scales on the violin is on A string to shift to the 3rd position, right? So that's all the difference as far as going up is concerned. So going up, usually this is what I like to do. I go up until the C on E string in the 3rd position, and then, so that D will be the first shift happens to that D with the first finger, and then E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, and E flat. So basically you have two shifts up to 1, 2, 1, 2, and then you're gonna have to play all fingers in a row until you hit the D, and then to get the E flat, you're gonna go up with the slide up with the pinky, and then on the way back, you will repeat the E flat, you slide down with the pinky, and on the way down, that's when things happen to be different. So let's try, if you would like to play along with me, I'm gonna go really slowly so you can follow along. So here, so if you're starting on D string, it's easy, right? If you're starting on G string, what you want to make sure your second finger is perfectly in tune with your open D. Then it's very easy to find your E flat. You just plant your E flat next half a step and you're there. So if you've seen my scales before, you notice that I usually add a couple of notes at the beginning and the end of the scale. And that is, I'm kind of used to that, and I kind of like that practice. Growing up, when I was learning my scales back in Soviet Union, we always had that. The reason is that once I learned the scale, I like to play different amounts of notes per bow. And what I like about adding those notes, it helps you divide the scale evenly into quadruplets. And that, what it does is then later, it's just easier to go from 4 to 8 to 16 to 12 and so forth. And also the reason I like that, it makes me kind of think of scale a little bit more in the musical sense, because you remember that in music, most of the time, scales are used in the tonal music, and tonal music most of the time follows a pretty consistent meter, like it would be maybe 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, whatever it is. And you know, again, quadruplets are much more common probably than anything else in your usual repertoire, right? And so dividing scales like that into even quadruplets makes me think of scale more in the musical sense of how it fits into a pattern of rhythm. Maybe my measure becomes 3 beats of, you know, 3/4 or 4/4. So I feel that that really helps me fit my scales into a musical context rather than just think of a random 7-note pattern that usually is not so easily, you know, found in the regular like musical patterns that we usually play in the tonal music. So that's why I like adding those extra notes. So anyway, so here we are. So here's D and E flat. So let's go slowly. So we're gonna go E flat. And go ahead and use your whole bow. So you get a nice warm up for your bow arm too. So here's A flat, B flat, C, and here's our first shift to D. Then E flat, next shift is to F, G, one more shift to A flat, and then B flat, C flat, D, and now we have to extend the pinky to E flat. Got it? Now let's go back. So we're gonna repeat the E flat, then back with the pinky to the D, all the fingers down, C, B, A flat. Now third finger to G, F, E flat. Now here, the first fingering that we're gonna do, we're gonna go down to the third position. We're gonna go to a D, fourth finger. You see, now you're in the third position, you just stay there. C, B flat, A flat, G, F, E flat, D, C, right, so I hope you were able to follow me. Now you notice that I kind of mentioned what note I'm going to play next, and this is something very important actually. I've noticed that you know, sometimes if a violinist, a student, or already like a student, usually violinist, comes from the more of the orchestral background playing, meaning more of the in the group learning rather than private lessons, I noticed that sometimes instead of knowing what note they're going to be playing next, they kind of tend to try to just memorize fingering patterns first. Like their attention goes first to the fingering, and then maybe they start thinking of what notes they're playing. And so that is kind of, it's not that it's good to know which finger patterns you're playing, but if you really want to bring your playing up to the next level, if that's the case, I highly recommend that you always are aware of what actually pitch you're going to be playing next. So the way it works, I've noticed, and I never thought of it myself because that was kind of a given to me since I started as a kid with private lessons, and I was also taught solfege and theory right along with it because I was studying with this whole system back in you know, in Russia, former Soviet Union, where you kind of go to a music school and you start learning everything together as a whole rather than just your major instrument. And so what I realized, the way my thinking goes when I'm playing, when I look at the music, I see that black dot on paper, the very first thing that activates for me is my mind, because right away it thinks what pitch it is. And of course I think in do re mi's, I don't think in ABCs. That's harder for me. So but right now, suppose I see a pitch, I see the very first thing that registers in my mind is that it's E flat, suppose. Then next thing, and this happens pretty much at the same time, it's just, you know, I'm just gonna choose something. Then immediately I hear what this, hopefully hear what this pitch is going to be like, right? And technically that's enough. So if you can at least kind of create this kind of circle. So instead of thinking I on the dot and then straight from I to the finger, what you want to activate, you want to first activate your mind knowing what pitch this actually is on staff. And then you really want to hear it. And that already will make, and only after that it goes to your fingering, right? That already will make a huge difference. But for me, actually, there's one more step, because I'm so used to always, you know, when I was taught, the technique was always taught as the means to creating the art of music. And so for me, there is always one more step. So when I look at the music, first intellectual, I know what pitches it's going to be. Then my ears, my inner hearing tells me what it's supposed to sound like. But then it has to go through my heart, because I have to hear the kind of sound that I'm going to enjoy. And only after that it comes here, and here. And I feel that is kind of that circle. That's what really creates the music, instead of just the sound on the instrument. And I hope that makes sense to you guys. Let me see, I have wonderful comments. Oh, that's wonderful. My mom is saying that my aunt is watching too. That's great. And by the way, so thank you, Esther, for posting the link to our concert. For our concert yesterday, that was premiered on UTRGV, Patron of the Arts website, YouTube channel. And the program is called From Our Family to Yours, the side string duo. I hope that you guys go and watch it when you have a chance. The program was very, very fun for us. We were asked to record this in the UTRGV PAC auditorium. We had wonderful people helping us to create this really fun video program. It has everything. It has Baroque, beautiful Telemann sonata for violin and cello. It has Esther plays this phenomenal C major prelude from Bach suite. I'm playing a movement from a Bach sonata. Then I'm playing my own arrangement, and we also had this really beautiful Ave Maria Bach Gounod that we played together. And finally, we finished it with the finale of Kodai duo for violin and cello, which is super, super fun. And hopefully, God willing, if our Carnegie Hall concert happens this April 6th of 2021. That the Kodai movement is the finale of our whole Carnegie Hall program. So I hope you guys have a chance to watch this and enjoy it. But now back to regular programming. And as I was saying, having, training yourself to first, instead of going from eye to finger, to create that thinking pattern where it goes, what pitch you're playing, what the pitch is going to sound like. You imagine what kind of sound you will really enjoy, and then playing, it really makes a huge difference in the level of your performance. And so one of the ways that I encourage my students to help themselves to think pitches and not just what finger and what string I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be playing next, is to actually say the pitches before they play. So knowing which pitch is coming next. And I remember my kids too, I made them do that and they hated me for it, but now they're very grateful. So basically something like this. And if it's hard for you to do it with the bow, talking while bowing is kind of difficult. You could do it with the pits. So let's see if you can do it with me. Ready? Go. E flat, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, and so forth, right? Now, it's much easier for me to do it in solfege. Mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, re, mi, re, do, si, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, si, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, si, la, sol, fa, mi, re, fa, mi. You see, when it comes to solfege, that's how I think. So ABCs, I can't do quite as fast because I just don't think ABCs. My native musical language is solfege, and it's a fixed do, not a movable do. Movable do does not help you to be, to be consistent in your thinking patterns with the music. It really doesn't help to read music. It helps probably with some other things that I'm not sure because I never studied movable do. But if you are using solfege, definitely use fixed do. But I know that American musicians use ABCs, so that's the language I would use if I'm teaching myself to really understand what pitch I'm playing while I'm playing. So now let's go to the fingering pattern that I shared with you on B flat major, and we're going to apply it to the E flat major. As you remember, the B flat major starts in the first position with the first finger. So that's how we're going to start the E flat major. So find your D, then go to E flat go to E flat with the second finger, right? And so we're going to go, so we're starting basically in the fourth position and we'll end in the fourth position, right? But it really works very well. So let's try it. So slowly, E flat, then D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, then shift to D, E flat, shift to F, G, shift to A flat, and the same thing that we did before. And we're at the top. So now we're going to repeat the E flat, and we're going to go back 4-4, 3-2-1, and then we're going to do 2 shifts, 2-3, and that's it. And that will bring us down to the fourth position, and we'll just stay there. So let's do it. E flat, then 4 on D, C, B flat, A flat, G, F, E flat. Now instead of 4, we're going to do 3 on D. Exact same fingering, and you can go so from B flat, so all the way to F sharp major or G flat major, whatever you call it. You can totally use this pattern. It's very comfortable to use, and obviously it'll have the same whole step, half step patterns too in every position, because you're basically moving up the major scale. Every major scale has exact same pattern, right? So as I mentioned, this is the pattern I really like to introduce to my students as early as I can, because then we can use a lot of that pattern on a lot of scales going up. And once you're familiar with that, at least the finger pattern, it becomes a little bit less scary to use it on the new scales. So let me know if you guys have any questions as far as the E flat major scale is concerned. I will post the fingerings here, the link to my scale with my fingerings here, with both, actually 3 types of fingerings that we just went through on E flat major. But now I am super excited to go to Kreutzer 5. Like I said, it's one of the underrated etudes because it looks, it is very simple, and you can make it very simple, but that's the best part of it. So whether you're teaching intermediate, beginner, or super advanced students, you can, and the same for you, whether you're intermediate or a beginner or an advanced student or even a professional violinist like myself, you can find so many things there that will challenge you and help you progress and elevate your playing. And so number one, of course, the most obvious is E flat major scale, right? Key signature. It looks scary to a beginner, definitely, because, and if you look at the book, it starts with, the first etude is extremely difficult, but it's basically an A minor. The second etude is the most famous was C major. The third is in C major. The fourth is in C major. And then all of a sudden, 5, you have the E flat major. And so what I've noticed is that the hardest thing for my students who start with this etude is stop thinking of, like I said, second finger as being low 2 or high 2, and start thinking of it in a relationship to its distance from 1 or 2, distance to the next note that's played with third finger. And this is what I find. So when the person is starting this, you know, a lot of times their second finger is really, really flat. They tend to start okay, but they try to move their second finger down so far, and so that drives the intonation flatter and flatter with every next string they're going down. And at first I couldn't understand it, and then I figured it out that, again, that's the problem with thinking just finger patterns. Okay, I see that pitch and I know that that's always a low 2, because let's think of how we learn. Well, that's not the way I learned, but a lot of times here my students, you know, the first time they see G natural on E string, or C natural on A, or F natural on G, they usually learn it in a context of a major scale with sharps, right? Or a minor scale that doesn't have that, where the previous note is not a flat, right? So they usually learn it in that context where that low 2 is just half a step up from the first finger. And so what happens is that they get used to that note C natural or G natural. F natural is always touching the first finger. Now, not that there's anything wrong, that's true. This is very true that most of the time I learned those, the half step distance from first to second finger. You know, that was the first time I ever played those low 2 notes. But the problem comes when they forget to think of a musical context or tonal context or intervallic context and relationships of the fingers. That thinking of just finger patterns rather than thinking pitch and thinking of what this is going to sound like. And then, of course, relative, understanding your intervals. So when you start understanding the intervals, then it makes sense that your G is just in the normal place. Actually, normally the notes that would be low two in any other case, here they're not low two, they're regular two, because you are basically taking So number one, what the student needs to understand, or if you're studying this etude, is that forget about that low two reflex and think of your second finger only in relationship to the first finger. And so what you have to realize that on every string, your first finger will be right next to the nut, which means that you already probably instinctively moved your first position, your arm, from here to here. And once you did that, then you just play your regular pattern with the regular two, not the low two, but the regular two. Of course, with an exception of accidentals. Once you see an accidental, you're going to have to rethink it and make sure that you know what intervals you're playing. But if you want to do kind of a more mechanical thing, once you move your bow, your whole structure one whole step down, then your second finger is just in the right place. You see? So the third moves up and down, but the second finger is always here. So here it is. On E string, it'll be F natural to G. So let's play it together. Let's go over, and that's actually a great way to help your student understand the finger patterns in this etude, is to go over the relationship of first and second finger on every string here in E flat major. So obviously on E string it'll be F natural and G. So let's play it together. Again. Very good. Now let's move to A string, B flat to C. One more time. Now let's move on D string, E flat to F. Again, E flat to F. And then last but not least, A flat to B flat. And again. So I really think if you are having problems with being flat, going flat on this etude, I think that, or if you have a student who is having that problem, this is, I really believe, truly believe, at least from my experience, that's what happens. That realizing that even though those notes that normally trigger this low two reflex in a lot of violin students, if that's the way they think, if they think more about the finger patterns than the actual pitches and what they're supposed to sound like, then that will trigger immediately that low two reflex without them even realizing it, and they will try their hardest to move the second finger lower, closer to the first finger, and that will trigger that flat intonation in this etude. Let me see, we have someone. Hey, G Swipe, hey there, how are you doing? Thanks for watching, appreciate it. Hope you can watch our UTRGV patron, recital with Esther. It came out really good. Esther just posted the link there. So anyway, that's number one. Now, another thing that really is challenging here would be string crossings. String crossings, and as I mentioned, that's why I was so happy to see that question about the string crossings in my comments to a different Kreutzer etude. And actually, what makes it super challenging, even more than normal, is the fact that it's a triplet. They are triplets. So triplets are always bad news, especially when you're playing every note separately, because as you know, if we have these, every beat has 3 notes here. And that means that we alternate each note that happens on the next, on the next beat will be down and up. So it's not going, so if basically figure, what am I trying to say? Every group of notes, in this case is triplets, will start down or up. And that is already bad news for your bow, because when it sees a group of notes like quadruplet and it knows it starts down, somehow it becomes, the patterns become more predictable. So your body has a better way of predicting when the string crossings are happen, whether they're going to happen on up bow or down bow, and that makes it much easier, you know, when it comes to execution of string crossings. So because of that, the triple pattern, it makes it much more random. It's harder for your brain to keep anticipating which string crossings will happen on which bow direction. And so the triplet coupled with the fact that the whole etude is in the first position, that also, you know, when you're in the same position, that generates more string crossings, right? Because the reason we love climbing in the positions, at least I do, is that it helps me to eliminate some uncomfortable string crossings, because I'm more lazy in my bow arm than in the left hand. I don't know how you guys are. I always tell my students, you know, when they ask me, well, can I do something else here that's a little more comfortable? I tell them, you can't really on the violin, but you can pick your poison, you know. So it's either you'll work a little bit more in the left hand or a little bit more in the bow arm. But most of the time, it's very hard to find a place where you could do both. Less work in the left and less work in the bow arm. That happens very rarely. So here, this is the poison here. Yes, it's easy in the left hand in the sense that you're staying in the first position, but that makes it harder on your bow, because you're gonna do many more string crossings. And to add to that, I think, as I always say, you know, when you look at an etude, you have to realize the etude is a piece, but it's composed with certain challenges in mind, right? And I think maybe that's why he picked E flat major for this etude, because if you think of E flat major, you're in the first position, right? So you are already forced to play a lot more string crossings than normally if you were shifting up and down. And then you remember that sometimes we can use open string or fourth finger to create a little bit more comfortable situation for the bow, right? So if you don't like a certain string crossing that happens on up or down, you can, if at that point there is an A natural, E natural, D natural, or G natural, you could change that on, so switch that to an open string or a fourth finger, depending on how you want to, where you want your string crossing. And you could actually either make the string crossing sooner, one note sooner, or one note later. So that helps too tremendously to adjust the bow direction to whichever string crossing, wherever you would like your string crossing to be. So guess what? By taking E natural, A natural, and A natural and E natural out of the context, it makes it that much harder for us. So there's no way we can change where the string crossings are so far, at least on A string and on E string, A string, and A string. And so I wonder if that's why he also made this this etude in this key. So let's go to the string crossings. How do we work? What are some of the things that might help you to have your string crossings to be more comfortable and also cleaner? Yeah, that's, for example, for me, that's the thing that I have to watch. Anytime there's a string crossing, I have a situation that's prone to more of an unclean sound than if I'm already playing on the same string. So let's start with the beginning. So the very first string crossings happen down on E, up on E flat. So to right away, this is not a very comfortable string crossing. Usually it's more comfortable if it were up. No. Yeah. You see, up on E, down on A is much easier than down on E. Try it. So if you're going from an E string to A, up on E string, down on A is much more comfortable than down on E string, up on A. You see, it goes counterclockwise. Yeah, I think, right? So whichever, I get confused, but you get it. If you play violin, you know that some string crossings, every string crossing has a certain direction at which it's going to be more comfortable. So, and this is what I was talking. For example, if we didn't have an E flat, You see, we could have just played an open string on E and made it a much more comfortable string crossing. But because we can't play an open E, we have to deal with that uncomfortable string crossing right from the bat, off the bat. So one of the things that I highly recommend for this etude is to find the place on the bow that you're most comfortable with and start there. And then later you can transform and you can transpose it here or here, depending on what you want to do in the bow. But first, if you're dealing with just the string crossings, I would say use smaller bows and move somewhere where you're most comfortable making those string crossings. And so start there. And number one, what I would do, I would mark in my music that you see that first note on the next string, E flat, I would put an up bow over that E flat. If that is a string crossing that keeps sounding messy, a lot of times it's probably because you're getting caught off guard. So how do I mark those notes so I don't get caught off guard on those string crossings? The best way for me, I found, is to actually mark what is the bow direction on a new string. So in this case, I would mark E flat as up. No? I'm sorry, E flat would be down. Yeah, E flat is up. Yeah, and so then we go on, and guess what he does? Up, then down. So you see, you are getting later on, literally 2 notes after the first E flat, you again have to go to A string on E flat, but that time it's a down bow. So you see again how confusing. Now, we don't think of those things. We take it for granted that our body is so smart, but guess what? It is confusing for your bow arm. So again, I would definitely mark up bow on the first E, up bow, and then down. And if you just practice like this, you will see how much more clearer your sound will be, just because now you're understanding that the first string crossing, the first E flat is up bow, the next E flat is down bow. That just eliminates so much confusion. It's amazing. So I definitely, if you are working on getting your string crossings to be very, very precise, very accurate, and sounding really, really, really clean, this is number one technique that I use. It's amazing. It really clarifies so many things for me. So now the next thing that is also extremely important to the string crossings is something that, and you might be aware of it, that's great, bravo. If you're already aware of it, then you are so much more ahead than many people in this case. I was not aware of this for a long time. And so it's the gap between the strings that actually produces the gap on our bow when we're trying to produce a new note on a new string, which usually we don't make ourselves aware of. And so what happens, we think that, so let me show you. So if I play on E string down bow, and then I have to play the next note on up bow on A. Do you see that I'm not going to start from the same spot? Actually, my A string is a little bit further up on the bow in this case. So when I go up bow on A, I don't start in precisely the same spot as I ended on E. Does it make sense? Right? So now, why is it important? Well, the importance is that, because we're moving the bow constantly, we're having to adjust how much pressure and where we're applying on the bow. So for example, if you try to apply pressure here on the bow, it's one feeling. If you're applying pressure here, it's a completely different feeling. So your hand has to change, right? That's why we pronate more toward the end of the bow, and then we supinate toward the frog. That is why, because we are applying pressure to a slightly different point on the bow. So it goes farther away from our arm when we go higher. And so therefore we're having to do this, right? And then as we're coming closer to the bridge, we actually have to change everything, because now the pressure is much closer to our body, so we don't need to pronate quite as much, right? So because of that, I believe that's what makes it very, very important to be aware of that little gap that happens on your bow when you execute string crossings. And the easiest thing to do, and I tell it to my students all the time, watch the bow. That's all. It's amazing. I want you to try. And what do I mean by watching the bow? So if you do it with me, guys, if you put the bow on the string, right? Do you see that very point, wherever, it doesn't matter, here, just do it wherever it's comfortable for you. So you see that point in the bow where the bow is actually touching the string? That's where the sound will be produced, right? So there's that little cross you should see with that hair and the string produce, right? That's what I mean. When I say watch the bow, this is what I mean. Watch that very point. So as you're moving, let's try. So watch that cross on the bow. You see? Yeah. Can you do that? So now we're gonna, if you put the bow on 2 strings at once, guess what? You get 2 crosses, right? So let's bow on 2 strings at once and watch both crosses. Right? So if you understand what I mean, that's great, because then it'll be very easy for you to understand my next point about the string crossing that I'm trying to make here. So what happens when you're going from E to A? If you are watching right now those crosses on E string and A string, then it's very easy for you to see and notice and be aware of the fact that you're going to end E string in one part of the bow, and then you're going to start on a slightly higher part and then go down again. Try it again. So watch those crosses so you can see. Do you see the gap? Well, that seems very elementary. However, what happens with your body, because if your body is assuming that the point of pressure it's going to apply in the next note is exactly in the same place as it was where you left the E string, guess what? It's not going to be the most optimal pressure on that point. And so when it comes to something like this where you potentially are going to go very fast, that's when you get these really, really messy string crossings, or you get super uncomfortable and you can't figure out why. Because in the slow tempo, it doesn't really matter. Your body will have plenty of time to adjust. So if you're playing it doesn't matter. It's so slow, it's so slow. Your body knows, especially if you played for a while, your body has plenty of time to adjust the sound production at this speed. But if you're gonna go, guess what? No way you will have any time at all to be adjusting in that tempo. And that's when this understanding of and being aware of this little gap between the strings, I promise you, if you just start being aware of it during your practice, and especially during your performance, it will revolutionize your practice. You will notice that you will practice so much more effectively when it comes to the quality of your sound. Because just think of how many times in a piece you have to cross the strings. And imagine if you were aware precisely of where is that point of the next string that your bow needs pressure, and if you're constantly aware of it. So all you have to do, you just have to watch your bow. That's it. Let me see, I see a comment. Okay, we got a comment from Samuel Pasqualetto. Hi Samuel, good morning Dr. Seitz. Why do violinists use the bow tilted toward the fingerboard? As a bass player, my default mode is flat hair on the string. Fantastic question. I love that question, and that actually ties into spiccato that I'm going to talk later about. Very good. So this is actually a very interesting question, and for me, I have to say, from the very beginning, when the first time, and I was fortunate, I had wonderful teachers. My first teacher I'm just so grateful to her. She's the one who taught me how to play. And as a kid, this is what I remember. The very first time I put the bow on the string, I was asked to tilt it this way, away from the bridge. It was just something that we always did and never questioned, because it's kind of like breathing, that's what you do. You don't ask a question. And then what happened was very interesting. When I came to the US, I was already 25 years old, and I started teaching here, and that's when I found out that there are actually different schools. Some now I have to go back and clarify something. Yes, my teachers did encourage me to use flat hair too, sometimes, and in the upper part of the bow too. But the default thing has always been that tilt going away from the bridge, and so when I like I said, I never questioned it because that's just what I've been taught, right? But then when I came here and I found that there are actually different schools of thought on that, and sometimes people are encouraged to never tilt, and sometimes they do. So I decided to do a little research, and I've come now. This is not like super scientifically proven or anything. I just kind of Googled a lot of websites on that, and I found one that was very, very interesting to me because it explained to me actually that what happens when you tilt the bow or when you play with the flat hair to a sound physically. So supposedly they did experiments where they had the bow play flat hair, then tilt away from the bridge. That is usually it's either this or this, and then they had the bow play like this, tilted toward the bridge. And so this is what they found. So when you play with flat hair, and flat hair, by the way, doesn't really make you use more hair or less hair, because whether you tilt or flat or this way, the hair is very soft. So you're going to end up using about the same amount of hair. This is what is different. So when you're using flat hair, that means the stick is right above the hair all the time, like this. What happens is the pressure, you see, again, these are little things that we just don't usually pay attention to. You see that width of hair. So when you're putting your stick right above the hair, so the pressure that you're applying to the hair is exactly the same across. So whether the side that's a little closer to the bridge or the side that's a little closer to the fingerboard of your hair, of the width of your hair, will receive exact same pressure. So basically, this way across, the pressure that you're applying on the bow and then consequently on the string will be exactly the same. So, but then when you tilt this way, that's what makes the change in the sound. It has nothing to do with how much hair you're using in this case. So what happens when you tilt this way, guess what? Now you're applying a little bit more pressure to the part of the hair that's closer to the fingerboard, and a little bit less pressure to the part of the hair that's closer to the bridge. And then if you do it backwards, which is a very bad idea, never do it, and I'll tell you what they found out. Then what happens, you're applying more pressure on the hair, bow hair that's close to the bridge, and less pressure on the bow hair that's away from the bridge. Okay, well, I always get confused when I think bridge and frog, and I want to say fridge. So I almost did it again. Anyway, so what they're saying, this is why they did see in their experimental things with this machine that was measuring higher frequencies, lower frequencies that are produced by the bow, but that's on the violin. So I don't know if it's how well it translates to the bass. So on the violin, they said that when you play with flat hair, it produces a very good healthy sound, meaning that all of the frequencies that are supposed to be in a good healthy sound that your instrument can produce are there. So all of the frequencies are present in the sound, whatever that means. I don't know, but I guess it is a very good way to bow. You're not missing anything. You're doing just right. Now, wait, they say when they had the bow tilt, they found that you actually added some higher frequencies, whatever that means, I don't know, but supposedly it creates a little bit more brilliance in your sound, which that's what I've always been taught and told, that when you tilt the bow, and if you think like kind of a high-fits kind of brilliant sound, if you look, high-fits does tilt the bow usually. So again, this was, I did my research as best as I could. It does make sense to me because I feel like I can say that that's what I hear too in my sound. When I tilt a little bit away from the bridge, I do feel like the sound becomes brilliant and it goes farther. But again, it could be just my personal thing. But what they say, so both are good. This is good and this is good. supposedly this gives you perfect optimal sound. Supposedly this will give you this pressure toward the fingerboard will give you a little bit more higher frequencies in your sound, which is supposed to make it a little bit more brilliant. But they say don't ever do this. So when you do this, if you tilt the bow toward the bridge, then that will so for the bass players and for the cellos, it would be this way, which you guys usually, if you tilt this way away from the bridge. You see, that's so that kills a lot of frequencies that should be present in your playing. So that's what, from that experiment, so from my research, this is what I found out. And it has been very helpful to me, just in terms of understanding what does anything really change when you tilt the bow. So what does change is the pressure that you're applying across, you know, the width of the hair. And so you end up applying a little bit more pressure toward the fingerboard. And so to me, I think when it comes to starting the sound quickly, that makes sense that it would be a little easier because the string is a little softer here, right? And it's a little bit stiffer here. So obviously, if you want to make a nice accent or apply a lot of pressure, you know, really quickly, it would make sense to tilt a little bit and get a little bit more pressure toward the fingerboard because the string is softer and maybe it'll react a little bit quicker. However, when it comes to double bass and cello, the strings are, and even viola, guys, the strings are much thicker. The violin is the highest instrument, it's the smallest, you know, our strings are the softest. So I really don't, you know, I can't tell that I understand completely what's happening, but I would assume that as far as changing the tilt, it would have the same effect. So it's just how much pressure you're applying where on the string. And so hopefully that will help to sort it out. Now, I myself, really, I find myself that at the frog, I prefer to always tilt because I just have an easy way of controlling the bow at the frog. But you know, a lot of time I would deliberately straighten the hair and go flat hair somewhere from here to there. And, you know, depending on the situation, I do use flat hair. When it comes to Kreutzer number 5, again, so glad you asked about this, because then if we go from playing it just Detaché stroke to spiccato, definitely flat hair does help the bow jump. And I wonder if it's because now you're more balanced because you're applying exact same. Definitely, if you just try your spiccato, try it straight and now tilt. You see how it kind of killed the bounce immediately. I think maybe that has to do with it because spiccato is all about balancing a balancing act of gravity, right, and the bounce of the bow, and how you're able to balance those two out to allow your bow to naturally bounce, kind of like when you hit when you want the ball to bounce, you know, you want to hit kind of straight down, right, on the floor. You don't want to, like, if you do it on an angle, it will be very hard to know where the ball is going to go next, right? So I feel like this is a great question because I was going to go into spiccato, you know, situation with this etude if you go faster. And I definitely found out that flat hair on spiccato, oh my goodness, it makes it so much easier to do it. And so if you're just starting with this etude, I would say my recommendation is, depending on which level you are, for the beginner, someone who is playing still in the first position, just learning the basics of left hand and bowing, Detaché. This etude played quite slower with Detaché stroke is great because it'll help you to get your intonation straight in E flat major. Learn how to play in E flat major with flats in tune, and it will definitely help you to work on your Detaché. So in this case, you could do Detaché maybe at the top of the bow. And watch your bow so that when it comes to the string crossings, you are aware that you're going to start the note on the different string in a slightly different place. And that will just help you to get used to being aware of that. And your body will, it's amazing because our bodies are so smart. All they have to know is what. It's not how, they figure out how to do it. So Samuel Pescolet, thanks so much. This is very interesting and informative. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you so much for asking. That was a great question. So going back to spiccato, like I said, I was wondering if on the bass, you have the same, if it's the same, if playing spiccato with the flat hair also makes it easier than with the tilt. I'm just curious but I don't know, maybe on the bass you don't even ever use the tilt. I don't know, but yeah, let me know what you think about spiccato on the bass and how it works. But so going back to the Detaché, definitely also in my book I have several different bowing recommendations for this etude with slurs. And the most important thing, if you're playing this for the first time, I would accent the first note of every triplet so that I can get this idea of when the triplet starts down and when it starts up. So down, up, down, up. So the great thing about triplets, it helps you to even out your down and up bows. As we all know, the down bow most of the time, not always, but it's kind of like works most of the times with gravity. Not always, but most of the times. We kind of, and the way we start usually, if we start on A string, on E string, definitely the gravity just pulls us down. Now when it comes to up bows, it's like going uphill. You have to pull yourself up. So therefore, naturally, if we bow naturally on E string, we tend to kind of zigzag gradually toward the top of the bow. And by the way, if you have a problem with speeding up, in case when you play Detaché, separate Detaché strokes on any piece, that's probably why, because your up bows are getting shorter and shorter, and so the next down bow keeps coming sooner and sooner. So that's what triplets are great for, and that's why one of the really good ways to practice this, especially if you're just a beginner or intermediate player, definitely put accents on the down bows and up on the first notes of down bow and up bow triplets. It will really help you to understand how much more energy you need to put in the up bows, and it will definitely straighten it out. So if you're on a more advanced level, and if this is very easy for you, an easy etude, then I would suggest this is a great way to perfect your spiccato. Now, one of the things that I find interesting is that, you know, this Texas All-State, they have a Strauss excerpt where there are triplet, you know, there are triplet spiccato notes, and not only they're triplet spiccato, they're also in that same key, E flat major. So I thought that was kind of cool. So if you are working on those excerpts right now, this Kreutzer will be phenomenal for you, because even if you just practice a couple of first lines of this Kreutzer, you will see how much better you will be able to understand how this spiccato stroke works in the E flat major and with the triplets, because again, it makes your string crossings really randomized, because now your string crossings, your body doesn't know which string crossing is going to be which direction, because you're playing triplets, and so every first note of the group falls on the different direction of the bow, and so it's super confusing for your bow arm. And because of that, this is a great etude. I highly recommend. And so if you're working on your spiccato, if you're good with regular spiccato with the quadruplets, this is a really added challenge. Playing spiccato in triplets, I always found it much more difficult. So definitely work on your spiccato stroke. And I will post the Kreutzer 5 video that I just released last week here in the comments or in the description. But that's why I did 3 different tempos. I usually do just 2 for you guys. I usually do a fast and a slow. This time I found it important to do very fast and then kind of a medium tempo and then the slow tempo. So the medium tempo is the one that has the regular spiccato. regular spiccato, right? And again, here I would say one of the challenges is that each triplet starts with a up bow or down bow, and that's very important to be aware of. And then also the string crossings. So just like I said, to mark if you're having a problem with the string crossing, make sure and mark the bow direction in your music of the note that is on the new string. You will see that that will make it much more clear for you and easier. And definitely stay with the flat here. And then finally, if you want to bring it up a notch, then if you see if you can play along with me on the fastest version of that caprice, and you know, that might help you to give yourself a little added challenge, both intonation wise and spiccato wise. So Samuel Pasquale Leto says, first hair, flat hair does help a lot for spiccato. The bow bounces more easily, especially since we don't have gravity to help us, which violinists and violists do. That's great. You're right. That's true. When it comes to bowing, we do have gravity on our side a little bit more than the lower strings, because we kind of bow this way, so we can use that. That's great. So I'm glad, Samuel Pascoletto, I'm really glad that it translates really well into the lower strings too, which is kind of, Esther is not with me here, so I'm glad you're here. So you're adding that lower string vibe to our live that we didn't have last week. So guys, if you have any questions specifically for this etude or any other, feel free to ask me, but I'm just about to wrap up. I think those are the most important things that I've hit. And one more, the last speed. This is a great etude. If you're not sure how to practice faster things and how to be effective into getting yourself to play faster, this is a great etude to learn this. The reason it's so great is because it's not super complicated, you know, text-wise, so it's quite easy to learn, right? The rhythms are pretty, there's no rhythm challenges here, basically. They're all the same. So it's easy to learn the notes. It's easy to learn the rhythms here. So therefore, you can spend more time devoting to this question of how do I learn to play faster? And so this is actually a question that I get asked a lot. I do love playing things fast, and I naturally tend to be good at playing fast, you know, but still, you know, that's not enough. You do need to know how to practice. And of course, I want to, you know, make sure and say, yes, slow practicing is very important. And of course, before you try to play anything fast, you want to be able to execute the piece as close to perfection as possible in a slow tempo. That's number one requirement. Because if you try to start speeding things up before you can play them nearly perfectly or as good as you want it to be in the fast tempo, then you're setting yourself up for a huge failure. However, just practicing slow, as much as I agree with the importance of it, is not enough to get yourself to learn how to play fast, because there's so many things that change in the fast tempo. You know, even if you think of string crossings, you know, in the slow tempo, I have down one, so I don't know what, almost a whole second, half a second on each note, right? Or something like that I have. So I have all that time to do my string crossing, right? So obviously, if I don't practice in a faster tempo, how would I teach my body that this string crossing needs to happen in a much faster tempo? It's really hard. I mean, you could probably figure something out, but it would be really, really difficult. So that's number one. A lot of functions that are taking place in the slower tempo, the reason playing fast is harder because all of a sudden, you know, changing the fingers has to happen faster. String crossings have to happen faster. You can't be using the same amount of bow in the fast tempo as you're using in the slow tempo. So therefore, there's always this moment where you have to try to go faster and see if your slow practice is really directing you in the right direction For example, if you're trying to figure out certain fingerings here, that's not a question because everything is in the first position. But if I'm learning something that eventually will go very, very fast, and I'm trying to see what fingerings would work, I have to try it fast and to see if those fingerings will work for the faster tempo. So therefore, there is that time where you're going to have to speed up. And so my favorite thing actually is to use slurring. For example, this is etude that is completely, everything is separate. There's not a single slur here. But I found that I could speed up my left hand quicker if I slur things. It's just easier. I think because we don't realize how much work it is to change bow down up, to go down up all the time. And so when we take that out of the equation, it becomes a little bit easier to pay attention to your left hand and you can go faster. So for starters, for example, if you're presently at this tempo, but maybe you want to go, maybe you want to go to this tempo. What I would do, I would start slurring. Maybe I would practice, see how fast, see if you can play this etude slurring the whole measure like this. And I would set the metronome and I would start like this and see, you will be amazed at how much easier it will be to go faster on the slur than it is to go faster with the separate bowings. I don't know why, but it seems like less work, especially here since you don't have a lot of string crossings in a row, like something in row. The row 2, it has that little part, it's very difficult to play slur. But something like this where it's mostly scalar movement, scalar motion, it's really, really fun to slur it. Then next, I would slur it, maybe, see if once you get really comfortable doing this, you can go faster with the metronome. Another thing slurring does, it really evens out your left hand because you realize when you're slurring, your left hand is the one who has to keep track of rhythm and make sure that all the notes are exactly even in the speed and in the rhythm and the length of each note. So here it's very great on the slur. It's a great way if you're practicing with the metronome to even out your fingers and make sure that every finger is on the string just the right amount of time. So if you're comfortable playing on this tempo, play it 5 times in a row with the metronome and see if you can play the whole etude without messing up like this. Then suppose you did good, then take it up a couple of like 5 notches and do that at a faster tempo until you're very, very comfortable and you can play it a few times in a row. Next step would be double the amount of notes on bow. So instead of slurring 1 measure at a time, slur 2. So much fun, I cannot, it's hard for me to stop myself. But I promise you guys, this is amazing. It really works. Now, I'm not sure how it would work on the bass, double bass, because again, you guys are dealing with much thicker strings. But I know on the violin, and I did try it on viola, it worked very well too. When it comes to speeding up something like this, that is all separate notes, Detaché, it's amazing. So this is how I practice. One of my favorite ways to speed things up. So with the metronome, I go first on a slur with slurs, and then once I am at the tempo that I like, I go, now it's time to go back and unslur everything. Now I have to warn you that unslurring and playing things separately will set you back a little bit in your speed because it is much more work, and then you have to accommodate string crossings in a little bit different way. But you will be amazed at even going back a little bit, stepping back on your speed, you will still be already much faster than you were previously when you just started. It's amazing. And so then from there, you can do the same technique. You can build up with the metronome. So each tempo has to be comfortable enough where you could play 4 or 5 times in a row, feeling super comfortable. Then you can go up a couple of notches and practice it there. And finally, last but not least, make sure and break things up. Don't try to practice the whole etude at once. If you're whether you practice on your intonation or string crossings or speed, you're doing a speeding up work, it's extremely important that you break things up into manageable sections, because otherwise, at first, the concentration is very difficult to keep when you're doing something for the first time. And so my favorite way to do is, I love breaking things up into threes. And then what I do, I practice on Monday, suppose I practice one section, on Tuesday, second section, and Wednesday is the third section. And then I have another three and another half of the week to go over those sections the second time around, right? So it helps me to organize my practice and prevents me from sticking in the same, from getting stuck with just the beginning of the piece, right? So that's what I wanted to cover. And so I don't see any more comments. Guys, thank you so much. This was really fun. I am enjoying this very, very much. Now, good news is that Esther is going to be back in town very soon. So I am really, really looking forward to our next live. And I will put fingerings for E flat major that we went over today in once the live, has to process and publish, and then I will put some comments in the description box, and I will definitely add the link to the E flat major scale with the 3 types of fingerings that we just went over today. I am looking forward to the next week when Esther is here. But so far, I feel like this format really works very well, because we can kind of set this up and you guys kind of know what to look forward to. But if you would like us to look at anything else, please let us know in the comments to this live or other lives or any other things on our channel. We would love to hear from you and to just practice with you. And I hope that today's live whetted your appetite to go back to your instruments and have some really, really productive and happy practice time. Until the next time, you stay well, please, and practice on. And see you next